So my opponent made the claim that vaping has negative effects on the heart and brain of adolescents, and their secondary claims were toxic chemicals affect growing brains, and two, that heart and blood vessels become damaged with vaping. And what I'm going to do here is show how most of the toxic chemicals that she refers to can be removed, and how the experience and evidence she presents aren't really conclusive to real-world experience. So, number one, toxic chemicals affects growing brains. The toxic chemical she mostly refers to is nicotine, and the addictiveness and negative effects of nicotine are well known. There's no disputing that, but not all vape juices do contain nicotine, so consumers of vape products can bypass the risks of nicotine addiction when using nicotine-free vape juice. Also, regarding addiction, if the user is already addicted to nicotine, many advocates for vaping and those with anecdotal evidence suggest that nicotine-free vaping can be used to fight a nicotine addiction using different levels of nicotine in juices. You can easily lower your nicotine consumption over time. Quitting slowly is much easier and bearable compared to quitting all at once. And according to an article reviewed by Suzanne Falk, MD, the symptoms for nicotine withdrawal include intense cravings for nicotine, tingling in the hands and feet, sweating, nausea, abdominal cramping, constipation and gas, headaches, coughing, sore throat, insomnia, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, irritability, depression, weight gain, and a slower heart rate. So these withdrawal symptoms are one of the main reasons why smokers relapse, and vaping can help reduce these symptoms for an easier transition away from the addiction. So, and the opposition also uses a study conducted by Judy Zilikoff, who works at New York University's Langone Medical Center. In this study, they state that the rodents exposed to vapors free of nicotine, a whopping 830 more genes in the frontal cortex showed substantially altered activity, but further reading of the article reveals that the altered activity refers to behaviors that are reflective of increased or hyperactivity. Similar behavioral changes can also be found when ingesting caffeine, as not indicative of an overall negative health effect. And onto the heart and blood vessels that become damaged with vaping. Another study used by the opposition quoted Magnus Lundbeck, MD, PhD of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, saying that during the first 30 minutes after smoking e-cigarettes containing nicotine, a threefold increase in arterial stiffness was observed, as well as increases in blood pressure and heart rate. Immediately after, however, the article also states that these effects were not seen following the non-nicotine vaping session. They reported at the European Respiratory Society International Congress. So again, the removal of nicotine in vape products removes the negative effects associated with the nicotine found in traditional tobacco products. And another study used by the opposition, an experiment conducted by Matthew A. Nestoriak, PhD, and other researchers, they tested 15 different flavors on human cardiomyocytes, or cells in your heart. Their research suggested a negative effect on the heart due to chemicals found in the flavor, but in the same article, Nestoriak also states that the experiments were done in a petri dish and not on the real heart, which leaves out many variables involved in actual consumption. So this suggests that the results of this study are not yet conclusive to real-world conditions. And to further back this point, Dr. Werner Lilienbaum, an independent researcher who specializes in toxicology, reports that one reason why it's difficult to establish in vivo relevant in vitro systems is that isolated and cultivated primary cells usually differ strongly from the corresponding cell type in an organism. So, to conclude, the toxic chemicals found that affect growing brains found in some of these vape products, such as nicotine, that can be completely removed. And two, the experiments and evidence presented for heart and blood vessels becoming damaged with vaping are relatively inconclusive in real-world settings.
All right, the structural setup is fine. In the body of the speech, the dividing point between your 2 points was not as clear. It seemed like it ran together with the evidence that you had. Your first point, though, does talk about the removal of the nicotine as a likely way of addressing these kinds of issues, and you've got some good evidence suggesting that there doesn't seem to be any significant harm on this from the nicotine. Well, you actually... Your evidence, as I'm looking at it, is really more about the harmful consequences of withdrawing from nicotine as opposed to the safety of the other kinds of things. So I think maybe you do need a little bit more information on the safety of those alternative vape juices, I guess they're called. The study that you're talking about here also suggests that we can use these things as a way of reducing people's dependence on nicotine, and I do think that that's a kind of a good counterclaim on this point, that one of the reasons people originally chose these kinds of products is to avoid the hazards of tobacco use, but still maintain their ability to have access to the nicotine. And now the question is, can we get rid of the nicotine process as well? And your argument seems to be that we can. Either you can, if you don't have a nicotine addiction to begin with, then you can choose products that don't have nicotine in them, or if you do have a nicotine addiction, you can choose products and use them to decrease the dosages that you're getting so that you can reduce your dependence on that. I think that's basically what the claim is saying, and I think that could be simplified a little bit with your argument. All right, then after that, there's just a lot of challenges to the evidence that the advocate presented, which I thought was the strongest part of your argument. You suggest that you diminish kind of the claim about the alternation of the brain of the animals in the rat study, suggesting basically it was the equivalent of hyperactivity, which is similar to the effect of caffeine, which I assume means that you don't see it as being particularly serious. It's just a normal kind of impact from use of any substance like that might have some stimulant factor in it. All right, then there was a second question or a second report where you in essence talk about how the effects were not seen in the non-nicotine products. I thought that was pretty effective in responding to that whole point as well. And then you've got another study where actually I guess it's you're going into the advocate study and pointing out that they didn't really present some complete information on this point. It suggests that there are problems, and it's like in vitro studies that are being done here. And then you've got a kind of a follow-up explanation that says that these in vitro studies really are not reliable, or it's hard to make an application of the real-world experience. And I thought that was a good explanation of what's problematic with that particular piece of evidence. Like I said, I got a little bit lost on your second point. I'm sure it's there somewhere. I could follow your charges about the evidence, but I missed the one structural point. And part of the issue is people have a tendency to rush, and I understand that because 6 minutes is not a lot of time. But you did have a little bit more time, so you can pace yourself a little more effectively. All right, thank you.